Hey, it's Mirna from Trainer's Toolbox. Welcome to the Trainer's Toolbox podcast, a place where you can discover practical and effective tools and tips to make your workshops more insightful, engaging, and memorable. You are at the right place if you're looking to become the best trainer you can be and design truly impactful learning experiences. Ready? Let's dive in. In this episode with Deb from SessionLab, I really enjoyed exploring their brilliant State of Facilitation Report and learnings out of it. But my effort also in this episode is to take a bit of that facilitator mindset and just not go for, your average questions and just, talking about how report went, what were the insights, and just linearly talking out whatever is in the report. I really wanted to take a bit different lens because I believe State of Facilitation Report is bigger, much bigger than just this year's report. It's a project that really gives us insights also into how field of facilitation is developing year over year. And I love how they have that continuity. And I hope that's also something we can learn from, not just from this year's report. And at the same time, I recognize a lot of their facilitators' mindset and superpowers and skills in the way that they shaped the report. And I wanted to dig in a little bit into that. So if you're just looking for a quick summary of what were the main learnings out of this year's report, you will also get a bit of this, but just a very little bit. Then it's better to go read the report or listen to some of the podcasts covering that. But if you're looking also for a little bit different angle on what can we uncover in this report, then this is your episode to check out. I hope you will find it insightful, and I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Do let me know on LinkedIn, in the comments, replying to the newsletter, in any ways that we are connected. Hello. Today I'm really happy to host our guest episode again with Deborah Rim Moiso, one of my dear colleague facilitators, who is a freelance facilitator and trainer, specializing in environmental conflict facilitation, living in a gorgeous central Italy, and also working as a staff member at SessionLab. And that's one of our main topics today. One of the part of Deb's job there is writing guides on facilitation, editing the yearly State of Facilitation survey and report that comes out of that survey. And that's exactly the topic we want to explore today, because it's this treasure box with many insights for trainers and facilitators. And we want to dig in a bit and discover what can we learn out of it as facilitators and which new perspectives can we take. So Deb lives in a countryside where she takes care of land and crops and olives, and she has 3 friendly donkeys. I heard they're friendly. I have not met them yet. No, maybe we hear them at some point in the podcast episode. Let's see.
We might. That has happened before.
Cool. So if you hear strange noises, it's not lions. Worry not. It's just the donkeys. And just to introduce SessionLab briefly maybe as well, I would hope most of our audience, being trainers and facilitators, know about SessionLab already, but if not, it's an amazing software platform for session design. It's created by people who really understand facilitation and training needs. So it focuses primarily on designing your agenda, but there is so much more to unpack there. You can track your pre-works, pre-session and post-session work. You can discover many amazing activities in rich SessionLab library. I myself am adding many there lately. But it's also, I think, every solid facilitation activity can be found there. So even if there is an activity you know and you use, but you want to see it in a more structured way, get reminded of the main instructions or things to be careful about, SessionLab library is like a go-to place for that. So we will link it also in the episode descriptions. You can also discover there are many downloadable guides, Deb writing many of them, blog posts, a community of other facilitators that can support you with different ideas. And of course, that's a place to find the yearly State of Facilitation Report we are exploring today. Deb, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. And I'm really excited to learn and discover more from you today. Ready?
Lena, thank you. Yes, what an introduction. Can I carry you with me wherever I go?
Oh, please do, especially if it's in Italy and in the mountains. And yeah, I'm in.
You know you're welcome here.
Cool. So let's kickstart with the topic. My first question for those who have not encountered it yet is just to give a bit of an introduction. What is State of Facilitation Report? How did it came to be? Since when have you been creating it? And what is the goal behind it in a way? That's a lot of questions in one, but I'm basically asking, hey, what is it? Where is it coming from?
Sure, generic introductions. So, hello everyone, and thanks for listening. And if you know the report, I hope I can give you some information like backstage stuff that you might not know. And if you do not, you are my favorite people because then I get to introduce it to you from scratch. So, welcome. So, the State of Facilitation, let's call it project so we can put survey and report together. It's a project that we've been running at SessionLab for 5 years, essentially. Now it's the fourth edition, but we've been working on it for 5 years. And it's a survey that comes out usually in autumn that we put out for facilitators, anybody who uses facilitation in their work around the world. And we usually get about 1,000 responses. And then we package those responses into a report that comes out at the beginning of each year. And what it is and what it hopes to be, at least, is a mirror that we put out for the facilitation community worldwide to say, this is the situation now. This is a picture of what's going on, of demographics, of topics that facilitators in the world are working on, and of what are the kind of edges of the profession where we are growing. So that really does tell you a bit of what the intention behind it was originally and still is. So it started with basically, as many kind of entrepreneurial projects start, as noticing something one wanted and lacked. So myself and other people in the Session Lab team and our founders, Robbie and Philip, they were like, we could so use some more data about what facilitation is like around the world. Wouldn't it be great if there were an industry report like there are for many industries? So we went looking, and there were some attempts. I do want to honor them, like the IAF, the International Association of Facilitators, and also Miriam Hadness, your colleague in podcasting, and I believe also School of Facilitation's Kirsty Lewis had done some surveys, but nothing really thorough and that could continue year after year, because that's the fun thing about being a company and a business is that we can continue investing in this year after year and not with a volunteer association like IAF, which is great. I'm a part of IAF. It often comes up to individuals' initiative. Well, in this case, it's more of a structured project. So anyway, we were looking for that information. We couldn't find it. And we're like, okay, well, let's try and put it out ourselves. And we started in 2022 with the survey. So the first report is in 2023. And we were like, it was well received. People were like, oh, we really need it and this information, it's useful. And I'll tell you more about how that specific report was useful because it's one of my favorite success stories. So to show a mirror, and also, so it's about data. It's not so much about us giving tips or advice. We do that in other places, in guides, in the library. This is more like, here's what's happening. Of course, we tell a story around it, but it's about giving data and challenging in some areas the community to be like, we're doing great at this. Looks like we could do a little bit better at that. And then hoping that the real hope is that that opens conversations. And I think it does. Like every year it opens conversations and people start maybe changing something a little bit in their practice. I say people, but I mostly mean also organizations, businesses that work with facilitation might introduce some tweaks or work a little bit more in a certain direction. And that's when that happens, that's like the best thing that the report can do is challenge and, start those conversations and maybe hopefully make some change, hopefully in good directions.
Love that. Love the idea of conversation opener because I feel like, the moment you have a report in the name, people are something inclined to be, oh, so you take this, you read it, now you know it, move on. But no, the whole point is to open the gate, open the new topics, open the new conversations, introduce the new questions. And I feel like with that, you're also having a lot of influence. Which conversations to open. Like this year, we're also discussing it in trainers' conversations in the community on Trainers Toolbox. Just, taking it, talking it out, no agenda, no more like what caught everybody's eyes. And I think this is really interesting because then you get, when you actually talk it out with other trainers and facilitators, you also notice things you didn't notice when you were reading it, or maybe you open a whole new question. But I'm being an avid reader of reports from the first year. I love it. And one thing I love about it is this giving the different lens every year. and giving a different theme every year. And I think this is really interesting because even though, to be very fair, I miss some of the previous teams and to see how they developed this year. So I also see a bit of like downsides to that. Like I want to know everything, but I do appreciate how that makes it really focused, that we can really explore that topic and that year's report becomes not just a snapshot of what's going on that year, but it really also becomes almost a learning guide for that topic or exploration guide for that topic. That's why I feel like it's also very valuable to actually go back to previous year reports and check what's there and also reflect what maybe changed, even though they're all still fairly recent as it's been 5 years, but then also to kind of reflect on these themes a bit deeper. I'm very curious, how do you choose the theme and the topic? And also, if you want to introduce us also to theme this year, how did you choose it? Why this topic specifically?
Right. Woof, there's a lot I'd like to say so I am thrilled by the reaction of wanting to have more in it because it is quite a comprehensive report. And sometimes I'm worried that it's too comprehensive. But and here's how that leads to talking about themes. So as the main editor of the report, I'm constantly, navigating this tightrope of trying to have something in there for readers of different sorts. So I often start my process by writing like what is in here is going to be useful to people who want a lot of focus. What is going to be useful and skim it and read a few things and don't have time. And we have to acknowledge that is the truth of the world. But also what is going to be useful here for people like Mirna, for the Mirnas of the world who have read all the reports and really want some in-depth great panorama about many things that are going on. And then what is going to be useful for beginners and what is going to be useful for experienced people. What is going to be useful for freelancers and what is going to be useful for people working inside industries. Those are usually my guiding questions. And so it's a bit of trying to have something for everybody, but working on it, I can usually come up with a thread or a focus or a storyline that is, in fact, useful for all those different types of people, maybe knowing that they will read the report in a different way. So that's part of my process, and that includes choosing a theme. So the first two reports, so in 2023, we put out the first one based on data from 2022. That's why I'm saying 5 years, although it's 4 reports. Just for clarity, if you go looking for 5, you won't find 5, you'll find 4.
We'll celebrate the fifth one next year.
We will celebrate the fifth one next year. Absolutely. That's the plan, at least. So the first one didn't have a theme because we asked broad questions. It was the first one. So we were putting something out and seeing, was this going to work? And so you will find it. They're all still online, by the way. We will put them in the show notes. You will find questions on demographics. Like we were really asking ourselves questions like, who are facilitators? Where are they? How old are they? What are they doing? So there's no real topic to that one. Yeah, although a topic emerged, but I'll tell you more about that later. In the next year, we didn't give it a topic, but we did ask a lot of questions about tools and tech. So we can call it the Tools and Tech Edition, even though it wasn't called that formally. So there's all the same questions that we asked the first time, at least those that resonated. If we pruned some, it was the ones that turned out to not be very interesting. And lots of questions about tooling and what facilitators and trainers around the world are using as tools for their work beyond sticky notes and paper, which are always the number one tool reported. And we are proud of that.
Of course.
We go with that. We know that. And then what other tools are being used. And then the next year, which is the 2025 report, we focus on in-house facilitation. I know from reading Group Genius that it is not true that it was my idea. It cannot be. Group Genius, this book that tells how we have this myth of the innovator coming up with the idea, but it's actually conversation. So I'm sure it came out in conversation. It wasn't me. But let's say for the purpose of storytelling that I was very curious about the people in the facilitation world that I know the least about, which are in-house facilitators. Again, I'm going to make this a hero story. I met a person who works like that, who is the in-house facilitator for a small company in Italy. And I was like, that is so interesting. How do you do that? You're always working with the same people. What are you doing? And I was very curious. And then, of course, realized that he's not the only one. There are people working as in-house facilitators. And I think because in the freelance world, we kind of have communities and networks. And maybe the people who are working in-house have less of that. I feel like they're less well known, their particular challenges and problems. And so we're like, well, let's look into that. So you will find a focus on that. We still do ask most of the other questions, but there's a focus on in-house, and of course, there's a focus on AI because there has to be a focus on AI. It's 2020, it's asking questions in 2024. So there's a focus on AI and there's a focus on in-house facilitation. And then this year's, drum roll, if you don't know yet, this year's was about impact and learning transfer and what happens after the workshop is over. And that's because it's a very sexy topic. It's a very challenging topic. And there I am pretty sure that I was like, we should really write about impact, but I'm really scared to, and I don't want to. And I believe I went to our brilliant head of content, James Smart, and I said, James, I think that the topic should be impact, but I don't want to do it because there is no way that we can put out a report that says things like facilitation will improve your return on investment by 35% in 6 months. We cannot, that is not credible data. I don't think it's possible.
Mm.
And very often with visions, it's about, okay, let's put it this way. I like mythology. Very often with dragons, when you get closer to the dragon, it gets less scary.
You
You
find
know?
the cute side.
You find the cute side of the dragon. When you look at your inner dragons and you give them a name, they kind of start looking less scary. So my colleagues helped me think it through as in, of course, we cannot ask facilitators, what was the percentage of impact you created this year? But we can ask them other questions around impact. How do you conceptualize it? What do you do to prove it? Do you gather feedback after your workshops? How? And all these kinds of questions turned into the report this year.
And I love how these questions are also a bit of inception for people to think about it. So it's not just like getting the data in the survey, who is already doing something, how are people thinking about it. It's also, I think, many questions can actually give you an idea. What could I do? Or what did I not think about? Or what could I do differently? And then I think it's actually a bit encouraging that in the report, not to give too many spoilers, but that in the report, there is a lot of mentioning. Actually, many trainers are not really focused on this because I think that is the state of the field. And I feel like also within the context of train the trainer or advanced facilitation, whenever that topic emerges, it's always a bit like, there is maybe more to do. And I personally feel like we can even separate between focusing on how to create more impact and focusing how to measure impact for sake of external stakeholders. And for me, they're two very different things, actually, in a way. So I find it very also positive that just this conversation gets more open and that people can see and report, hey, first they can get a bit of a feeling from the questions, hey, I could be doing more. Wherever I am, I could be doing more. I think that's always the insight. But also, hey, look, everybody as the field is a bit of everywhere. It's not like 99 people are doing it great and I'm not doing enough and I would like to do more. It's more like I have some role models I can find here in the report and how they are doing it maybe, and what else can I add to my process. And I can also find some people who maybe thought of it even less than me, so I can also feel a bit encouraged. Hey, actually, I've been doing a good job to a point. Kind of like, I like to say this also in terms of goals and life goals, and that the place I strive for, it's like feeling content about what I do, yet aspiring for more. So it's not like, coming out of place of self-criticism, I suck, I never do enough, I need to do more. But it's kind of like, hey, I love what I'm doing and I'm proud of what I'm doing, yet there is always that very trainer's drive for self-improvement. What is next? What can I improve? And I think report gives us a really, even more, maybe the survey than the report gives us also a good, both in combination, give us a good base for that to have
Yeah.
that balance in a way.
Yeah, that makes me very happy because I tried to craft the survey questions in a way that so the survey is long and people are incredibly generous to fill it out. So thank you for doing that, people. Keep doing that. But I do try to make the survey questions interesting in their own right, exactly in the direction that you say, like just inviting reflection. Some question you can skip any question, but some question are open questions, so it could give some people write some pretty articulate responses, which I hope gave them some time to reflect and
Mm,
think, and make it kind of an end of year journal sort of
yeah.
activity. And about what you said about like both striving and also accepting. So two things I love in this year's report. We include some quotes. They're anonymous. The survey is fully anonymous, so I have
Mm,
no idea who wrote this brilliant answer. We asked, how do you talk about impact to your clients? And one person gave this fantastic response, which is like, I don't, comma, I probably should, comma, but I don't. Full stop. I'm like, yep. Thank you for saying that, for truth telling. I think
yeah.
that person speaks for many of us. And then about the ambition, this year we added these lovely illustrations, courtesy of our wonderful visual facilitator, Gemma Palacio, like, she helped me really condense all that information into visuals, as our colleagues who are visual facilitators and graphic facilitators, they do this amazingly. They're like superheroes at condensing information. And she has these like illustrations based on the answers that we segmented as the most experienced facilitators gave. So the ones who
Hmm.
self-diagnose as I am an experienced facilitator, because it doesn't depend on years, really. It
Mm,
depends on the
mm,
kind of work you do. And so we asked, do you consider yourself a beginner, intermediate, or experienced facilitators? And so she has these visuals that you could go and see in the report, summarizing, okay, this is what the superheroes most experienced, condensed, like best do. And maybe one of those could be a future tip for you,
yeah.
for me. I consider myself an
Yeah.
intermediate facilitator. We don't have to take them all. We don't have to be like, she drew them as superheroes with capes. We don't have to be superheroes, but we can pick some of those
Mm,
if they look like what we want to do next. So there is a
yeah.
lot of that. What could be my next steps? We should never get stuck, right? As
Yeah,
trainers.
yeah, I love this. Yeah, you just gave me a bit of an insight, or also a bit of confirmation, because for advanced facilitation training, I keep framing it as this is a training for experienced facilitators, but I keep struggling with this language because the point is it's not for total newbies. But
Yeah,
what are experienced facilitators? It really depends. And all the time people keep asking what's the prerequisite, and all the time like I don't know, let's talk and then I can tell you will you get the value or not. Because like if you did 2 workshops, then it's not for you, but if you did 200, maybe it's still not for you. It's like there is the value you can get out of it in terms of feedback and insights and new perspectives and exposure to other facilitators' work. But this is going to really depend on what can you bring in, what are you looking to build next, if that will give you value. And now the way you framed it, I'm thinking it's actually a perfect training for intermediate facilitators, but I still don't know how to write that and how to say that.
now,
Because if
if it helps at all, the way we ask it in the
uh-huh,
survey is we ask experience. That's why you heard a beep. If you heard a beep, it's because I was opening the report.
uh-huh,
We asked people to self-diagnose as experienced,
mm-hmm,
intermediate, or beginner. And experience, we define like this: facilitated a wide range of scenarios, experienced in handling complex group dynamics, large group workshops, etc. So it's not about time, it's more about complexity. I don't
yeah.
know if that helps.
Yeah, but I think I will ask you later for the definition of intermediate to send it over, because I think that's the one I need.
Sure,
Yeah,
and you can
because it's
find it
such
in the
a
report.
that was exactly my point as well. Like to set like you need 5 years of experience, that
Yeah, that
does just
doesn't work.
yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But then at the same time, if you've been doing all the time the same thing, like
That
recently I
also
spoke
doesn't
to
work.
someone who is really specialized doing like design
Yeah,
sprints and so on, and they want to learn more. And I'm like, yeah, that's a tough position in terms of finding the right course and the right learning experience,
that's
because in
true.
one thing you're really experienced and that has many sub skills, but then you have a big gap in other things and it's really hard to balance it. But anyway, I'm drifting off topic now. Let's get back to the report. We have much more to explore there. I did frame when we were planning this conversation that I would really like us to see this State of Facilitation report a bit more holistically and year over year. What is the value that is building up, and not to get too zoomed into this year. But at the same time, this year's topic is amazing and it's really exciting and a lot for us to learn. So I do want to ask you for maybe a brief, quick overview of maybe just a couple of interesting insights you uncovered in this year report that are just, almost like a trivia facts we can share with everyone here. And I do want to invite everyone, go to the report, dig in deeper, talk it out with other trainers and facilitators. But maybe we can also show them a bit what it is about.
Sure. So the section on impact, which is the meaty, the big central section of this year's report, is divided in three, as you mentioned two of them already. So it's increasing impact, measuring impact, and communicating impact, which is mostly about storytelling, which is, I know, is one of Mirna's hot topics, favorite topics. Yeah. Mine too, as a facilitator who also writes about facilitation. So I think the main finding that is, the quoted one, if you don't have time to dig into the report, there is like a 6 key findings fact sheet right at the start, is about the fact that facilitators overwhelmingly responded that yes, they are measuring something. What they are measuring is their performance, how well the workshop went. Rate this workshop from 1 to 10 in 3 words. How did it go? All that stuff. And I think over 75% of respondents said that they do that kind of thing. And that is fantastic. That's great. That is an incredibly solid thing to build on. We should not give it for granted. I don't think it's in every profession that people self-evaluate their performance like that. And also overwhelmingly, which kind of goes together, again, 70% said that what they do with that is they reflect on their own or with their peers and co-facilitators. So that's good. And then to be improved is that only 1 on 3 discusses impact assessment measurements with their clients or the people commissioning the workshop. So we're doing very well at reflecting on performance. We are not doing that great at, okay, but what happens afterwards? Which is often called learning transfer or just transfer in the L&D world. Impact, you can also kind of talk about it as value, but what happens afterwards is critical for more people. So that's one big topic.
Can I throw in a random thought
please.
there? I'm thinking now that is so us, like trainers and facilitators. Everybody focused on self-development and improvement and learning. On business, not as much. And I think it just comes naturally, as this is our forte, this is where we're good, this is where we do almost more than necessary on self-improvement and
almost more than necessary.
Yeah, like business it's not in our primarily focus. Usually it's like something to support our work, not something to run our work around totally. But I also think that with that, that can be a little bit also because our work feels very impactful and we see and feel the impact in the room. And it's also impact that's very hard to measure. So I think these are also 2 tricky things. One, well, it's there. Obviously, we don't feel like we need to measure it much more because we see it. It's very tangible. But at the same time, it's also very hard to show it in numbers. So I think it's not an easy task to work to improve that, I would say.
And that's where the session on storytelling and on communicating impact and value gets very interesting, because it totally echoes your reaction. We asked people, how do you communicate the impact of your programs? How do you talk about them? And how do you think that your client talks about them? Now, this, of course, if you're a data scientist, you'll be like, that result cannot be statistically anything because it's what do I think that somebody else thinks. But still, it's kind of, let's look at the narrative of this. And the narrative is that most people who responded were like, I talk about value and impact of my workshops the way Mirna just did. The quality is great. The vibes are fantastic. The people are happy. There's a feeling, sometimes it's challenging, but then we come out of it feeling unified and aligned and
insights are flying.
Insights are flying, right. And then the client talks about much more concrete things. And decisions were made fast. Good things, huh? Decisions were made faster. Meetings were more efficient. We had more staff retention, or it was easier to onboard people, or our managers report better satisfaction outcomes and things like that. So all that we say about how wonderful our workshops are is probably true, but I do think, and the report kind of shows that we just need a better way to translate and articulate
Mm.
that in the business world. I keep repeating so we have experts in writing for the report. So there's the data, and then there's always 6 to 10 experts from various sides of the field doing their commentary. And this year we tried to draw in more people from L&D, and we had wonderful experiences working with the great Melanie Martinelli, who many of you might know from the Institute of Transfer Effectiveness, and Chris Taylor from Actionable.co, which is just software about tracking behavioral change. And they have a piece together writing about what they think about this storytelling and reflecting on impact. And then when we presented the report in an online event, Melanie told this story about she travels a lot in the world, and she says where there are less resources available for various reasons, less money, less time, then the discourse on impact becomes as natural as this discourse on vibes that we really like to make.
I love that.
And so in these times, when things might get a little bit tighter and it might become more important, we don't need to really change anything that we do. It's a matter of how we tell the story about how great the workshop was and tell the story about how useful it will actually be to some sort of bottom line, which can be like a happiness index. It doesn't necessarily, if thinking about it as a bottom line economically is scary, it can be some other sort of bottom line. But
Mm.
what is the effect? And we asked also in the report about challenges. And again, there's a lovely illustration about what were the main challenges. And the thing is, what's challenging there is that it's no longer dependent just on us as trainers. It's about the whole organization's culture. How is it going to accept these decisions made at the workshop or these new learnings learned at the workshop? And that's why I think we find it hard, because it means having another level of conversations that's just not in the room of the workshop. It's before and it's
Yeah.
after. But it also raises our profile, because it becomes more like being consultants and accompanying the group, the company, the organization, the NGO to do what they're there to do, which I think makes us
Mm.
happy because we do want
Mm.
to have an
Mm.
impact.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And speaking of Melanie, a while back she sent me one of the best books on learning transfer called What Makes Transfer Really Work. I think that's the name. So we're going to link the book as well in the episode
Oh, let's.
notes, as I think it's really good place to start, or to also kind of how to say this, like wrap up together all the things we can think about the transfer. I think it's really nice as a strong framework, even to things we're maybe already doing and using, to just kind of it wraps them up in a nice strong place altogether. So we're gonna definitely link that one. But what would you say for people interested in impact measurement? What is a good way for them to keep learning, to explore this topic more, to dig in deeper, apart from reading the report, which is your must-go step if you haven't done it yet? Tell us
Reading the
more.
report, following Melanie's work, and reading that book is great advice. So we have also put out a little resource. It's little because it's 20 pages, but it's pretty dense. Like, it's packed with information from Session Lab. And the reason which is called Session Lab's Guide to
Mm-hmm.
High Impact Facilitation. And the reason we did that is that in the report, our attempt is to give a mirror, as I said, to give the data. And of course, the experts whom we invite in, and we really want to have different voices in there, give their advice. But the report in itself is more like questioning and asking information of the reader and showing information and asking questions back. But then with the topic of impact, it was like, yeah, but there are so many good tips out there, especially from the world of L&D that has been
Mm.
struggling with this issue of counting the uncountable, measuring the unmeasurable, recounting the unrecountable for a little bit longer, I think, than the pure facilitation world. So we packaged that into a guide, and you can download it for free from Session Lab, and Mirna will put it in the in the show notes.
Mirna read it, Mirna loved it, Mirna recommends it.
Oh,
Go and
that's
read it.
what did you like about it? I'm putting you
You
on the
know,
spot.
exactly what I liked about it is leading us straight to my next question, and probably my favorite question for today. And you have a hint of it already, I think. And that's how do you get those insights out of this bunch of data? So one thing that really impresses me in the Session Lab report is that it comes with so much clarity and with so much conclusions and where do things point, and it shows many open questions, but ultimately it really makes sense out of this bunch of data, and it's just in my body I can recognize it and feel it, like this really good convergence, when in facilitation you're like, okay, now people throw in all of this stuff into the conversation. What do I do with this? How do I take this into structured conversation and ultimately into some sort of clarity, insights, conclusions? I love how that's done in the report. I also see a bit of a progress on it this year in comparison, maybe because there are more of these great visuals you were mentioning. I think
I think
maybe
so.
that supports the clarity a bit, but I'm really curious. What is your process? How do you distill the insights? What is the process to get that raw data and then be like, okay, now let's make sense out of this?
Okay. Welcome to my Christmas holidays. Because this usually happens over Christmas. Okay, I love this. I love this question. It's a challenging question because I think I'm a forward-looking person to look back and be like, okay, how do I do this? It was very interesting, and I'm very glad you did let me know a little bit in advance to be asking this. And also I love that you're framing it as convergence. That really helped me think about it because that's what it is. And I realize going back that some of the things I do can be helpful in general for us facilitators with sitting with, oh my God, we have all this bunch of post-its, and now how are we going to turn them into a coherent report and turn them into a coherent story? So, first of all, it starts with the questions that we ask, and that's true of the survey and it's true in a workshop. So, I spend a lot of time, and with my colleagues, of course, thinking about the questions we will ask, and I do start with an idea of the narrative that we will have in the report. Now, of course, I don't really know what's going to come out of it. There are always surprises, but I have a sense about like the main contrasts, I guess, that there will
Mm-hmm,
be there.
mm-hmm,
Like I assumed going into this one an impact, I assumed that we would find that people do not record anything, do not ask anything after. So I was surprised when it was no, actually a super majority does record effects. It's just very short term. So the contrast changed from we don't, we do to we do short term, we don't long term. But I still had a sense. So it starts by asking questions that might lead in a direction of a certain narrative or tell a certain story. And I do look at the questions as like, is this going to be interesting to read? And sometimes I make
mm-hmm.
mistakes. There are some questions you guys have answered that do not end up in the report because they were utterly uninteresting to
Fair enough.
read or phrased in a way that made ultimately no sense. And yep, mistakes were made. So that's part of it. And then we get a lot of data. And I do spend a lot of time with that data. So there is something valuable and magical and very human, I think, in spending a lot of time with a lot of responses and then allowing some sort of story to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is not everybody's mindset. I am also a storyteller, so this does come to me. And maybe that's not true of
Mm-hmm.
everybody. I'm not sure. There might be a particular neural biological skill involved that I don't even, not even aware that I am using. But what I am emphasizing here is that I do read most of them and spend a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time with them, even when they're quite long. And some sort of sense making emerges where like there are like many responses and what I'm usually looking for is where's the majority and where are the absolute crazy outliers that also make for
Okay.
interesting points. Somebody who might be very, very experienced and saying they're doing some things that only they do, but that's very interesting. That's very advanced and that's okay. Or somebody who might come from a different place in the world. We still get relatively few answers from far-flung countries. Africa is underrepresented. South America is underrepresented. Japan is underrepresented. I know there's 1,500 facilitators in Japan. I think it's a language barrier. So I look for those that are maybe peculiar, and I look for what the majority says. I do use AI for some help, but I'm saying it now after I said that because that's more or less when. First, I do like to sit a lot with the data
Mm, mm.
myself because it's very easy for AI to draw boring out like
Average conclusions, yeah,
average conclusions that are like telling us nothing. But I have found it very useful for some like analysis. I'm not a mathematician. Well, AI is also not a mathematician, but for some data analysis, I do find it useful. So I use it a bit as a support. So there's asking good questions, spending time sifting through the data and kind of allowing meaning to emerge. And then there's the help of a graphic and visual facilitator. I do agree with you that having those visuals is very enriching to the report. And then there's the questions I ask myself, and that's the fourth and last point I'm going to bring, which is while I sift through the data, I have these kind of guiding questions that are about what in here is going to be useful for a beginner. And I
yeah.
try and track a beginner's journey through the report. What is going to be useful for a very experienced person? And I kind of track their imaginary, I'm imagining my audience, my different user profiles going through the report. What is going to be useful for a manager? In an L&D department. Is this going to be interesting for a freelancer? Is this going to be interesting, for somebody who doesn't know anything about facilitation and might be looking at it for the first time? So I try to read the meaning and the stories through the eyes of different possible kinds of readers. Did I answer your
Mm.
question?
Yes, even though some of the things you shared, I can see how they could also give you more options, not just converge. But yes, definitely. Thank you.
Right,
I
and I
love
should
the.
explain why that's my Christmas holidays. So we opened the survey in autumn. We usually close it around November or so, and the quiet time when I actually get to do sifting generally ends up being around the winter, Christmas, holidays, New Year's. So that is very often true that I need that extra bit of space, and that my family might not see me as much as they want to.
Plus, it feels like a gift to read all
Plus,
these
it feels like
insights.
a gift.
Speaking of which, what would you say are your main kind of personal insights? What did you learn throughout this process of working on the report throughout the years, both about the world of facilitation and about reports? I know that's a big question, but still, I do see certain evolution through these 4 years of the report itself, and both the survey and the report. And I'm curious, how did your evolution work with that as well?
Well, there's a very personal a note that I had not prepared at all, which is about which I'm like, why am I saying this now? Which is about I personally learned to take more responsibility. So this report I wasn't the main editor the first year.
Mhm.
Philip Kish, who is our this is chief technical officer, and Myrna knows him too, so that's why I'm mentioning. Okay, yeah, Philip.
And I know he was
Uh,
very passionate about the report, getting it
uh,
out there.
Indeed, it was his originally it was his idea. Like, we need this. Let's make this happen. And of course, he's technically brilliant, so I was leaning on him a lot. And then he has other things to do. So at one point, I was like, whoops, now what's going to happen? Am I going to like abandon this project because I'm alone in it? And so I did learn to take more responsibility. So that was a bit of personal growth. More in general, I learn and relearn and relearn all the time that facilitation is an incredibly generous community. I am always in awe that people spend their time responding to the survey. And in the survey, like that at the end of the survey, you click on it, and then if you want to, you can add your email afterwards so that it stays anonymous to receive more information. And then there's a box for like feedback for us, and the feedback is so often, can I help? I have this other data. Can I offer? There's a whole group of Polish Polish facilitators who made their own research about Poland, and they're always offering the results. And so the facilitation community is amazingly generous. And this is just my learning over and over. And I guess it's what fuels me to like just want to keep doing it every year. And the other thing that I love, and I teased it, I think, at the beginning of this interview, was that I I'm a qualitative storytelling person. I'm not a quantitative person at all. And I learned that data can help lead to change. And I did not know that. And my favorite example of this is the first year. One of the striking things about demographics, and you would not assume there's much striking in demographics, it was the absence of youth.
Hmm.
So every year we ask a few demographic questions, and every year the young, I think, I forget if how we define young, but let's say 20 somethings
Mm.
who are answering the survey are like 2.5, 3%. That is a scary underrepresentation because then where's the next generation of facilitators?
Mm.
Of course, you can argue there's good reasons for that. People need some business experience or some working experience or some NGO experience before they realize that meetings are shitty and they need to make the meetings better, and then they pick up those skills. And but I don't think that's how things should go. I think facilitation should be taught way more in school. I think there are, by the way, many young facilitators facilitating environmental movements and facilitating in NGOs and scouts and in their own student organizations, but they're not well connected with the rest of the facilitation world.
With the professional world, yeah.
They might not know it's a career. So that was the data. Like, let's say it was 2.5 or 3% are young. And the many organizations, but I know personally the International Association of Facilitators acted on that data and introduced a new pathway for young facilitators, discounts for young facilitators, specific meetings and like interest groups for them to kind of foster this new
Mm.
generation. Hey, I use the word foster and I'm not an AI. That's funny. So I learned that just putting out the data and just the question like, hello, where are the young facilitators can lead to actual change. And that is that's the
Mm.
stuff that makes me happiest. Very,
Love
very
it.
exciting.
Yeah, love it. I didn't know that bit. That's really cool to know. Cool. Thank you for sharing. Now, we talked about being content yet aspiring. So I have to ask this, about the report as well. What is the next aspiration? What is the next dream for the next year? Do you have anything about the topic in mind? You can already give us a hint, or that's secret, or still not known. What is next?
I don't think we have secrets at SessionLab. We are like transparency is one of our values, and we're constantly putting things out there for the community. So no secrecy. So main dream is to continue to do it every year. I mean, continuity is not granted, it's not a given, it's not something magically distributed from above. So that's my main dream is that we continue doing it every year. I think it has value. I think it's important. I hope the community, the worlds keep thinking that it's important and we do it kind of right. So that's maybe there's things trainers say for like the low dream and the high dream. So that's like the basic dream. Um, I keep drawing in more voices. I think it's
Mm.
better the more voices and the more diverse voices there are, diverse in all sense, walks of life, nationalities. And that's why we do not have a topic for next year yet. So we do not have the opportunity to spoil it on the podcast. But there are things I'm thinking about. And I would like there to be something around exactly worldwide facilitation, cultural diversity, cultural competency. I was at the European Middle East IAF meetup in Bucharest, which was fabulous. And I did notice, I felt that many facilitators there could have a growing edge in terms of like they were great, I'm not saying, but in terms of cultural competency and that kind of diversity in the room. So I would love to bring in more voices. So there might be something around that. Kirsty Lewis has expressed a wish for something on pricing and the business side, which, as you also mentioned, is sometimes a hotspot for facilitators. I don't know. Do you have a wish, Verna? Is there a topic
Oh, I have to think
you've been
about
thinking?
this. I would support Kirsty's idea on pricing. I remember that was featured in one of the surveys. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 years ago, and I felt like it was very insightful. Also from that side of what are the questions and also what are the answers. I would definitely support that. But I need to think a little bit, because if you asked me this last year, I would say about training follow up, and
Oh, yay.
so not necessarily impact, but more like
Yeah.
how to strengthen. What do you do after the session to actually strengthen to make sure things are really landing, and
Huh.
maybe also about science based. How much do you build on science based?
That's also a great topic.
It's a bit more for trainers maybe than facilitators, but a bit of both.
I
Yeah,
get the personal feeling that sometimes we make claims that come from neurobiology, but do they really? And I also think that there's not enough research, like academic research
yeah,
in facilitation. So that could be another great topic. And I'll just throw the questions to your listeners as well.
yeah.
Reach out if you have. It now is the time from now to summer where we shape next year. So if you have wishes,
Love that.
desires, curiosities, if it doesn't end up being the topic of the report, it might be the topic of something else. Like what you said about follow-up, that could maybe be another like little specific publication that comes out after this one on impact about specifically on follow-up, which I also think is a
Yeah,
great
how do
topic.
you
Yeah.
extend it in a way? Yeah, but I'll think a bit more, also share some ideas. Speaking of which, where can people connect with you? Where can they keep learning from you? And also, where can they keep learning from Session Lab? What are the best places, and what should we link in the episode?
Okay, so as many of our colleagues, I live on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn.
See you there.
See you there. I have a very peculiar name, only one in the world with a surname like Rim Moiso, so you will easily find me. Of course, go to SessionLab.com. There is a section on resources. You click there and you have the State of Facilitation Report from all years. Yes, all years are there. You just have to scroll to the bottom. And there's another section called Publications where you can download all sorts of guides, and the blog where we blog on like shorter topics. So that's a good place. And if you are curious about Session Lab in general, which is a great software tool to use to improve your workshops and also to kind of organize your work. I'm very much a
Mhm.
believer in facilitation portfolios. So I also train newcomers to facilitation. One of the things I tell them is start building your portfolio, start having your like workshop templates that you can reuse and you can show your clients so they get a sense of who are you in this market. And a good way of doing that is to have them in your own like library and workspace on Session Lab. So if you want to try out Session Lab, we have a discount code for you. It's actually more than a discount code. It's like an extra long trial code. So Myrna's going to put it in the show notes. And what you get there is full access to all of the pro features for a month. So you can really try it out. Our research says that facilitators generally give at least one workshop a month, both beginners and intermediate. So in a month, you should have the time to try it out for a real world workshop and try out the features and see if it's useful for you. So
Cool.
those are good tips, I think.
Love that. We will directly link the reports from this year as well, and then the high impact facilitation guide. I would still also support that, saying go to the library as well if you haven't been there before. Check out what's there in terms of activities, and then definitely in the community. I'm
Yes.
active there as well. I would love to see you there. And there are also many cool webinars and like from different facilitators and like a lot of learning resources.
Oh
So,
yeah, I was recently in the community at Myrna's workshop on storytelling, and the
for
recording is
example,
there.
the
It was
best
very
workshop
good.
there.
Well, I don't go to many of them because I don't never have I never have the time. I never make the time, but I made the time for that one because storytelling is a great topic.
Jokes aside, go to the community to workshop recordings and you will find way too much from me, including
No.
class storytelling workshop recordings. So,
But
yeah.
two more things. So about the library, we've recently introduced a feature where you can search by author.
Ah,
And
cool.
that's kind of part of creating your portfolio. Because if you have
That's cool.
methods and templates, you can put them there, and that can be you can do that, and then you can show your clients, look, these are the kind of methods that I like to use, because it kind of
Yeah.
gives a sense. But also, if the topic of impact is the one that you are most interested in right now, because you've heard about it and you've started reading the report, I did notice that on Myrna's podcast, there are a few episodes on learning transfer.
There is one so far, but there will be more, many more.
I think there is more, but they're just not called learning transfer
Fair
because,
enough. Yeah. One
yeah,
is called, I think, follow up, something about follow
yeah.
up. We will link them. We will link them right at the end of the video as well. Thank you for mentioning that. I do have ambition to dig in more in that topic in future episodes as well. So remember to also subscribe, keep an eye on the next episodes. For sure, there is more coming. Maybe we do another episode digging into SessionLab stuff. There is a lot there to unpack.
Absolutely.
And for the library, I just want to say you did give us a challenge. I think it's such a good library already that it's really hard to find new methods to add. I'm lucky to have that positive psychology side of things and realizing there's not so much from that area there. I'm adding a lot of these methods. But in reality, I was like, oh, I could add this. No, it's already there. Oh, I could add this. No, it's already there. So,
Nice.
yes, it's a bit of a challenge. And treasure at the same time.
I think I can make it a challenge. So I think we need more methods that can support trainers and facilitators in learning about working with neurodiversity in the room. So if people who are listening, if you have methods or tips that help with that, go add them to the library because I think it's not the only field that's underrepresented, but it's the only one I can think of off the top of my head.
And I know a few people who I will invite to do that. Thinking, cool, perfect. So one final last question, the one we like to close off with most of the guest episodes, or hopefully all of the guest episodes, if I don't forget it in some. What is one tip, one ultimate fundamental tip you would give to trainers and facilitators listening to us? I know it's a bit hard to say because who knows who's listening? Are they beginners, intermediate, experienced, or anything, who knows what their background is and what they might be already doing. So it's a bit hard to give that tip, but what would you say it's one thing that is really important and that you wish to see more facilitators or all of the facilitators to have that more, do that more, incorporate that more? Your ultimate tip.
So I will not go in life, be facilitators. But for the topic of impact of facilitation, I think there is an ultimate tip, which is that it's about mindset. When we prepared the new guide on high impact facilitation, the first tip on the first infographic is think about impact throughout your process. And someone who read it told me, well, that's very generic. And I was like, yeah, it's very generic. True. But to me, to be constantly having this in mind and just asking myself the questions, have I considered what's happening after? Have I considered the impact of this? Not just that it's my favorite activity, but have I considered the impact it's going to have? That is actually, it's good enough. Like if you're asking yourself and keeping an impact mindset or a learning transfer mindset throughout all your work, I think that's enough. Because you'll come up with your own strategies and then you can learn other people's strategies and tools. But I think mindset is really the most important one, so I'm going to stick with that one.
Cool, love it. So don't just feel it, but also think about it, measure it, do it, and
write a
talk
sticker.
to others. Yeah, and talk to others about it. I think that's really important bit as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Deb, thank you so much for joining me today. Oh my God, the time flew by like an hour.
I have no idea.
I always keep saying with guest episodes, let's keep it to 45 minutes because, that's easy to listen. And then it's always like an hour because there is too much.
I hope people weren't stuck in traffic while listening to this.
I hope they discovered something new and interesting. Of course, do connect with both Deb and me and let us know what did we miss. What should we talk about more, being it in future podcast episodes or on LinkedIn or in newsletters? What are you still looking to uncover? What did you stay curious about? And also if you have any feedback on your main insights for both of us, that's really valuable to know. So do let us know.
Yeah, and what did we get wrong? We also read those. I read all the feedback that's like, what could have we done better? And we tried.
Cool. Love it. And I'm only regretting a bit that we had no donkeys joining the call in the end.
It's because it's spring. There is a lot of grass outside. They are happy.
They
don't need me to give them some extra hay because it's a beautiful spring day and the grass is growing.
Cool. Wish you a beautiful day. Thank you for joining me. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for exploring this topic with me. I hope you found some exciting ideas and valuable tools that you will use already today. Remember, they only work if you put them in practice. But then they make all the difference. If you enjoy Trainer's Toolbox podcast, do leave a rating and review. It does mean a lot. And if you haven't done it yet, click on the links in the episode descriptions and discover free materials and valuable resources to dive in deeper. See you in the next episode or at Trainer's Toolbox newsletter.